3 people are already dead by the time you realize the coup has begun. The radio hisses before it speaks, a thin filament of static cutting through the ceiling fan's tired rotation. You keep your eyes on the street below the safehouse window, watching the bakery open its shutters as if nothing in the city has changed. 2 blocks over, armored vehicles idle with their engines running, heat shimmering above the asphalt. You've already burned 3 phones this morning. The 4th sits in your pocket, warm against your thigh like a small animal. You were told it would be quiet work. Liaison meetings, political atmospherics, development grants with other names. The first month was embassy coffee and carefully worded cables, your signature appearing beneath phrases that meant nothing to anyone outside your building. You learned the rhythms of the place. When the power dipped, which intersections flooded, which ministers drank too much, and which ones pretended not to. Competence was camouflage. You listened more than you spoke, filed reports that seemed unimportant, built a map in your head that no one else could see. A colonel became your entry point. He liked imported cigarettes and the illusion of being understood. You let him talk about logistics, about morale, about the chain of command as if it were a fragile instrument only he could tune. You never asked for secrets. You let him offer them to you in exchange for the performance of respect. In the evenings, you walked back through humid streets, cataloging faces, memorizing license plates, telling yourself it was analysis, not selection. The first time you shift something, it feels procedural. A small payment rooted through a foundation that funds civil society, a delay in a shipment that creates a shortage no one can trace. You watch the price of cooking oil spike in the market and note how quickly anger finds a direction. You write that the opposition is gaining energy. You don't write that, you nudged the domino. You sleep well that night. After that, the machinery becomes visible. You understand who needs permission and who only needs the appearance of it. You arrange meetings that look accidental, leak rumors that sound like gossip, amplify grievances that were already there but lacked an echo. The colonel introduces you to a major who knows a general who controls a brigade stationed just outside the capital. They speak in euphemisms, and you translate them into timelines. The city continues its routines. Children in uniforms walk past murals of leaders who will not last the year. Street vendors argue about soccer. You sit in air-conditioned rooms and decide which narrative will feel inevitable by the time the first shot is fired. It's not ideology that moves things, it's access, leverage, and the promise that someone else will bear the risk. You begin to feel the system respond, calls returned faster, doors opened before you knock. Your cables receive immediate acknowledgement. You stop asking for guidance and start providing options. Language shifts subtly. You recommend rather than observe. Headquarters approves your proposals with edits that make them sound like their own ideas. You understand this is how authority works. It flows toward those who make decisions look easy. Money moves through channels you don't see but know exist. Radios are distributed to units that claim they've always had them. A media outlet changes ownership overnight and starts running stories about corruption that is both real and selectively timed. The colonel stops pretending to be in control and begins asking what comes next. You never answer directly. You let him believe he's anticipating you. At some point, the line you imagined between observation and orchestration dissolves. A protest route changes because you suggested a better square for visibility. The police response is heavier than planned because someone misread a message you wrote too quickly. 3 people die, their names appear in a report. You skim between meetings. You tell yourself the numbers will be larger if nothing changes. You start keeping a second notebook that never leaves your pocket. It contains no names, only arrows and dates, and the shorthand of leverage, who owes whom, which broadcast station goes dark if the transmitter fails, which airport gate remains unlocked after midnight. The notebook is a map of pressure points. When you flip through it, you feel something close to mastery, a clean geometry imposed on a messy country. Confidence comes quietly. You notice that you're no longer surprised by events. You've rehearsed them all in your head. The day the finance minister resigns, you already have a statement drafted for the opposition spokesperson you've never met. The night a convoy moves toward the capital without authorization, you know which checkpoints will wave it through. You begin to believe that inevitability can be manufactured. The colonel grows cautious. He asks about guarantees, about what happens after. He explains stability in terms that sound like continuity. He nods, but his eyes linger on the door. You realize he has started recording your meetings. You don't confront him. Instead, you introduce him to someone else who needs his favor. Pressure redistributes. The recordings stop. Your embassy badge opens doors you no longer enter. You meet sources in parking garages, in churches during weekday afternoons, in the back rooms of restaurants that close early. You carry no weapons, but you understand that proximity to power is a kind of armor. When you walk through crowds, people step aside without knowing why. The morning of the coup arrives without announcement. Communications degrade in a pattern you recognize as intentional. State television loops and nature documentary. Armored vehicles that were 2 blocks away last week now occupy the central plaza. You watch from a balcony with a glass of something warm and unidentifiable, listening to the city hesitate. The plan unfolds along the lines you drew, though not perfectly. A brigade declares for the constitutional order, which is not the phrase you provided. A radio station you expected to support the announcement goes silent. You send 3 messages through 3 channels and receive 2 confirmations. The colonel calls to say he cannot reach the general. You tell him to hold position and sound calm. For a few hours, it feels like control. Ministers disappear. The opposition leader emerges with a prepared statement that mirrors the language you ceded months ago. Crowds gather in the square, you suggested, holding signs printed by a nonprofit that doesn't exist. You allow yourself to think of this as choreography. Then the variables begin to move. A second brigade you didn't account for deploys to the airport. The police commissioner you believed neutral orders arrests at the television station. Your media asset calls to say the transmitter has failed in a way that cannot be reversed. You realize that someone else has been mapping the same pressure points, drawing a different geometry over yours. Headquarters sends a message that contains no verbs. You read it 3 times before understanding that you are being instructed to report, not act. The colonel calls again, his voice tight, asking for assurances you cannot provide. You tell him to avoid the plaza. He says he's already there. Gunfire sounds like fireworks at a distance. You keep your position at the window, watching the bakery close its shutters in reverse. A crowd runs past in the wrong direction. A vehicle burns at the corner, smoke drifting upward in a column that will appear in satellite imagery before anyone here sees it. You try to reach the general. No response. You contact the major. His phone is off. The opposition spokesperson sends a message that reads like a farewell. You realize that your network, which felt like a system, is actually a series of individual decisions converging in ways you can't predict. By afternoon, the narrative fractures. State television returns with a new logo and a statement condemning foreign interference. The phrase is familiar. You wrote its counterpart for a different scenario. Your badge no longer guarantees entry anywhere. The embassy sends a vehicle that takes too long to arrive. The colonel disappears. You hear rumors of an arrest, then of a promotion, then nothing. Your notebook becomes useless. The arrows no longer point to leverage, only to absence. You begin destroying documents, feeding pages into a sink one by one, watching ink dissolve into a gray smear. A knock at the door freezes you in place. It's not the way your contacts knock. You wait without breathing until the footsteps recede. The ceiling fan continues its tired rotation, stirring the smell of burned paper. You think about the 3 names in the report you skimmed weeks ago. You think about how easily numbers become abstractions when they align with a plan. Now the plan has no shape, and the numbers feel heavier. The embassy orders a reduction in presence. You pack a bag that contains nothing you brought with you. The streets are quieter than they should be, an artificial calm imposed by curfew. At a checkpoint, a young soldier examines your passport with exaggerated care. He asks what you do. You say you work in development. He smiles as if he knows the answer is both true and irrelevant. Inside the vehicle, you watch the city slide past. Murals already painted over, posters torn down. The plaza you chose for visibility, now occupied by a monument draped in a flag you didn't expect to see. Your phone vibrates with messages you cannot answer. Back at the embassy, the air conditioning hums too loudly. People speak in low voices, using language that turns events into processes. You file a report that avoids first-person pronouns. You describe outcomes without assigning agency. It reads like a document written by someone who observed rather than orchestrated. In the following days, news arrives in fragments: arrests, realignments, statements of loyalty. The narrative settles into a shape that excludes you entirely. The colonel's name appears once, then never again. The opposition leader flees the country. The general gives a speech about sovereignty that contains phrases you recognize from your own cables. Inverted, you begin to understand that control was always an illusion sustained by momentum. You didn't move the system. You accelerated currents that would have found their own direction. The geometry you imposed existed only in your notebook. A transfer order arrives with no explanation. Another country, another set of atmospherics, another map to build. You pack the same bag, lighter now. At the airport, the young soldier from the checkpoint stands near the gate, speaking to a colleague. He doesn't look at you. On the plane, you sit by the window as the city recedes into a pattern of lights and dark spaces. From above, the plaza is indistinguishable from any other square. The bakery is a small rectangle you cannot locate. The armored vehicles are invisible. You open your second notebook, now empty except for faint impressions of erased arrows. The pages feel heavier than they should. You consider writing something, a new map, a new set of pressure points, but the geometry won't hold in your mind. The cabin lights dim, people sleep. The engine's steady vibration replaces the hiss of the radio. You close the notebook and slide it into the seat pocket, leaving it behind without looking back. For the first time since you arrived, there is nothing to anticipate, nothing to shape, no message to send that will alter what happens next. The system continues without you, indifferent to your absence. You watch the darkness outside the window, waiting for the horizon to appear, and it doesn't.